For this discussion, we have Andrew Green Hannon. He is an adjunct lecturer at Emerson College, and he holds a PhD from Yale University's American Studies program. His research focuses on the American counterculture and the New Left, and he is a local expert on psychedelics. Andrew, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about psychedelics.
Andrew, let's jump in. Tell us, who was Timothy Leary and what was the Harvard Psilocybin Project?
Timothy Leary, when he came to the Boston area, was a moderately successful adjunct lecturer, and he joined the Harvard Psychology Department to follow experiments in behaviorism, to build on tools and assessments that he had been working on in California. By the time he left Harvard, he had become internationally infamous as an advocate for the use and enjoyment of psychedelics, including psilocybin, but also LSD, most known for his association as an advocate for lysergic acid diethylamide. His first year there, he takes over teaching a class that is supposed to survey an average American family. They take the tools of assessment from assessing incoming prisoners at Concord MCI for mental illness or at McLean Hospital, again, for forms of mental illness, and they decide to use these tools as a profile of an average American family. The family finds the process of being profiled by the behaviorists of Harvard to be a profoundly traumatizing situation. And the father of the family, who is my grandfather, comes to Leary and says, "What are you doing to my family? You are just upsetting my children and traumatizing my wife." And Leary says, "You are absolutely right. Psychology and the social games that we are playing, the social role of authority that I take over, there is no other way for this to take place other than to be traumatizing to you. I can't keep doing the work that I have been doing. I cannot study behavior anymore. I need to study consciousness." And around this time, a friend of his gives him a Life magazine that's a couple years old and has profiles of Mexican traditional uses of psilocybin and what we call magic mushrooms. And Leary has this crisis of intellectual confidence of like, I have been doing the wrong thing with the last 20 years of my professional life. I have to abandon behaviorism and study how to change your mind. So he goes to Mexico and he is eating psilocybin by August of 1960 and comes back the following semester. By September, he is saying, we really need to be studying these. He is telling his friend and mentor, Richard Alpert, who is a full professor at Harvard, we need to be changing what we are studying. This gives us tremendous insight into the foundations of consciousness.
Understood. And that's the Harvard Psilocybin Project. With all that said, I want to bring it back here to the local. Boston is a hub of psychedelic research. We have a lot of institutions such as Mass General Hospital researching how psychedelics affect the brain. Harvard has launched its study of psychedelics in society and culture last year, focusing on how psychedelics impact our society. I wonder, in what ways is modern psychedelic research influenced by Leary's early work?
I think Leary mostly serves as a form of inspiration and also as a cautionary tale. The early work on psychedelics that the Harvard Psilocybin Project was doing is scientifically legitimate and academically worthwhile. And then it kind of escaped from the official studies, and Richard Alpert, Ram Dass, began just sharing it with other people, including undergraduates. And I think ethically we can all decide that drugging students who are underage is ethically
not good.
Not good. No, not good. So that is no longer done. It has taken a long time for, following those studies and the ethical blowback and then the criminalization for people to be able to study things again. And there has been a lot of sort of rebuilding. There has been a turn in the last 10 years to be quite interested in psychedelics. And the Boston area institutions had a more complicated relationship. I think Harvard University has torn down every single building that Leary ever worked in or set foot in and had a much more embattled relationship with him and did not want to be associated with him until fairly recently. In the last 10 years, they've started acquiring archival history of it, but Leary's archives are now at the New York Public Library rather than anywhere in the Boston area, in part out of this sort of institutional discomfort with Leary himself. Psychedelic studies are taking a turn, and there has been a tremendous amount of very legitimate scientific studies detailing the ways in which it can, help address depression, interactions with artistic creativity, and those kinds of more recent studies. But they've all been done with the sort of cautionary tale of Leary, but also Leary as an inspiration.
Mm-hmm. What lessons can today's advocates and researchers learn from those previous movements, with Timothy Leary? What can they learn from those when it comes to understanding psychedelics today and where we are? And how might all of that influence the current decriminalization movement?
I think one of the most important lessons that people have taken is an avoidance of kinds of cults of personality and an uncritical reverence for a sort of guru figure. And I think all of us are much more critical of someone taking on that kind of role and much more not interested in taking on it ourselves and suspicious of the kinds of people who might want that self-aggrandizing kind of thing. And that as long as the issue is on psychedelics and rather than the person advocating, I think that's the issue, that the lesson that everyone is taking, that we can avoid most of the excesses as long as we focus on the facts, on the drugs themselves, and rather than making it about ourselves. Leary loved his role as high priest of LSD. He just took to it in this fantastic way. It was much more satisfying to him than being an unsuccessful adjunct lecturer ever was. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest lessons is avoiding cults of personalities.
Understood. Well, Andrew, this was a lot. This was an adventure, a trip, if you will.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much for all of this, man. This is very informative. So
thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
That's adjunct lecturer at Emerson College and local expert on psychedelics, Andrew Green Hannon.